first question we ask is really technical. It's what your name is, where you were born, and when you were born.
My name is Daniel S. Pettee, and I was born in New York City on February 15th, 1925.
Did you grow up there?
No, not really. I think I grew up in Illinois, but I've lived in 21 different houses in my life.
States? That's quite a collection.
Yeah.
Where did you go to school? Grade school, high school?
I started grade school in New York, but I wound up in Illinois. You ever hear of Winnetka? Yeah, that's where I went through. Well, they call it middle school now, but it's called. I don't remember. Anyway, in Winnetka, and also high school.
All I remember in music, jazz was Big Noise from Winnetka.
That's the one, yeah.
So, well, how did you happen to wind up in the military?
Well, I was drafted right after high school. That was 1943. My family had moved to New Jersey in the meantime, so I was drafted from New Jersey.
So where'd you go? Where did they put you right away?
Put me down in Fort Benning, Georgia. And then I said I'd like to do some education. So they said, well, we'll see what we can do. We'll put you in college in Atlanta. So I was there for 3 months. They said, no, we need infantrymen. So they put me back in the infantry. And I was in near Fayetteville, North Carolina. Yeah, Fort Benning, Georgia. And then Atlanta for 3 months, going to school. And then back in the infantry in North Carolina, near Fayetteville. Fort Bragg, it's called. And I was there for about 6 months, and then they sent us overseas.
Okay, where'd you arrive overseas when you got there?
In France, near Marseille.
Well, what kind of activity was going on at that time?
Well, that was about the middle of October, 1944. D-Day in France was in June 44, so it's some months after that.
Everybody knows about D-Day,
Yeah.
up in Normandy there, but not many people know about the invasion you were a part of in southern France.
Right.
Did you go in with the amphibious invasion?
No, we went in much after all the rest of the troops had gone north. We just went in easy. I went with a couple of other guys, AWOL, you know what that is, into Marseille from our campsite. And I needed to find out some things, so I asked questions in French. So they knew I could speak French.
When you needed it, you used it.
Right.
Did you get in trouble for going AWOL?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we were gone all day, and we finally got back to camp, and they hadn't even missed us. Outrageous.
Security wasn't that great in
No.
your unit, was it?
Once you met the enemy.
Oh, and the next day, the sergeant says, the squad sergeant says, company just sent down some passes, and we're going to distribute them. We'll start the front of each squad, so he hands the first one to me. And I said to this other guy who had been with me, keep your mouth shut. He says, don't worry about me, but you'll owe me one.
The American GI.
Yeah.
How many guys got to go in AWOL?
Well, I went in just once AWOL, and then with the pass once. And while I was in there the second time, I I saw this girl who was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I'm going to tell you the whole story, it's too long, but we went back to camp and I wondered maybe I could go AWOL again and see her. But nobody got any more passes and they called everything off and we were sent up to the front. The American troops were already moving through France at that time. So they sent us up to the northeastern part of France. You've heard of Alsace and Lorraine? That's where I fought.
Did you have much resistance as you went through the southern part of the country until you got up into Alsace-Lorraine?
No, we just drove up there. On the way up, one of the sergeants says, "What are we doing in this war for anyway?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know. I think Hitler declared war on us." And he said, "It did not. We declared war on them first," and everybody disagreed with him. And I said, you know, after we got bombed at Pearl Harbor, Japs declared war on us, and then the Germans declared war on us. You know, so he says, "Don't give me Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt sucked us in, sucked the Japanese in there, so we'd be sure to be in the war." And I said, "I don't know whether we know what Roosevelt was thinking, but anyway, we have to get rid of old Schicklgruber." And he didn't know who that was because he looked totally blank.
Way to explain that.
Yeah,
to
not many people
youngsters.
understand. Not many people understand what Schicklgruber means, and kind of explain it about
Well,
Schicklgruber.
See, I don't think I know what the words mean, but wasn't that a Jewish name?
Well, it was part of Hitler's family.
Yeah, right.
One of their family names was
Right.
Schicklgruber, and it was kind of a derisive term, I think, that people used for him, if I remember right.
It was, I remember the name being, I was young.
Yeah.
I just remember the name being derogatory.
Yeah.
But the sergeant didn't know, didn't have that.
No.
Was he a career Army guy?
Well, no. In our first skirmish, which was rather short, which I called the Battle of the Six Bushes, he took off and ran back down the hill out of harm's way. And that didn't surprise me because he wasn't in favor of the war. But, you know, we thought we were supposed to support each other up there. Later, we ran into him in the division rest area. and he didn't know any better, so he goes around and starts glad-handing everybody, and everybody went, you know, "Who are you?"
That's incredible. He just turned and ran.
Yeah.
Did you have other good sergeants, good leaders?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I was the first scout, you know, the guy in front. And I found myself in the middle of this field, and I couldn't see anybody, but everybody was shelling it. Both sides were shelling the same area, and I was in the middle of it. I just dug in, and I didn't get very far before they said, "Come on, Pettee, move forward." So I moved forward like I was made of old beat-up fence boards or something, you know. Then I dropped down again and started digging again, and they said, "Now, you're too far out front, come on back." And while I was out there, I saw off to the left about 50 feet, a huge arm and shoulder, no body attached to it. The body had been hit direct by a shell, and it turned out to be one of the other platoon members.
But no Germans, nothing.
No, it wasn't German, it was American.
What kind of resistance did you run into
Well,
from Germans?
some of it was vicious, but of interest was that I think the Germans were on their last legs even then. I remember this, we were in one battle and we killed 3 guys, and one of them had one arm. The Germans sent this guy up to the front lines with one arm.
So they were down to the older soldiers and just what they could
Yeah,
put together.
yeah. And then later I met some, I don't know, 14, 15-year-old soldiers, Germans, surrendering.
That had to be a surprise to you after what you'd heard about the war.
Oh, yeah. Well, I knew that the things were winding up, but it'd take a few more months.
What do these kids act like when you found them? You know, you're looking for German hardened soldiers. How did they act?
Well, we came up to this house with a big hole in it, and we heard excited voices inside. So I shouted in German, "Heraus mit Hände hoch," which means, "Come out with your hands up." and these 15, I don't know, 11 guys came out. 15, 14-year-old guys came out with their hands over, and they just stood there, you know. They were not interested in fighting.
How did you know the German?
You won't believe how I learned that. Well, I was interested in opera in high school, and I learned these German operas and Wagner's stuff. I also knew French because I'd studied French in high school, so I was the company's French interpreter.
I bet that came in handy at times.
Oh, it did, yeah.
What was the feeling going into combat? Just all of a sudden, here you are, and it's a shooting war.
Well, sometimes I felt more frightened than frightening, even though I was loaded down with all kinds of weapons. But another time, I remember, much later in the battles, we were following some tanks into a town. And we were behind the last one, and it went in through an intersection and ran over a mine. And it blew the track off, and so it stalled the tank there. And all these guys stopped behind it, you know. And I thought, my God, they're going to blow this place to hell in the next few seconds. We got to get out of here. So I ran forward past the tank, shouting, "Let's go!" You know. And we all went into the town, and that was where we got the 14 and 15-year-old prisoners.
But you charged right into it.
Yeah. But I didn't feel the least bit frightened at that time. It just depends. One time, I thought we were in reserve, but turned out we were right on the front. And I propped down behind a pine tree in its shadow, and bullets were flying all around. And then, in one instant, 2 feet in front of my face, earth vaulted up. And I said, "Why, those bastards, they're trying to kill me."
The bullet landed right in front of you?
Yeah, 2 feet in front of my face. So I said, "They're trying to kill me." And so I looked down and I saw this squared helmet and head above a pile of logs. So I took careful aim and squeezed off a shot, and it disappeared. And then the battle ended. I'm not sure whether that ended it, but it might have. But I went down there, and there was a German soldier belly down on his machine gun tripod, belly up. And our medic rolled him over, and he had a bullet hole right there. And I was astounded. I was pleased, the guy's trying to kill me. But then, a little bit later, who am I? What am I capable of? Jesus. So shut it all out. Don't think about it.
What was your group? What was your outfits?
I was in C Company, the 399th Infantry Regiment of the 100th Infantry Division.
So what, was it the kind of opposition that you were expecting, or did it kind of surprise you what was happening?
And nothing really surprised me, no.
How long were you up around the front?
Altogether, about 2 months. Yeah, but you're not on the front all that time.
You talked about you were only really in the battle, or in the combat zone 2 months. Was that typical for a lot of soldiers kind of in your area? Were people going in and getting wounded quickly and then going back, or?
I don't know. I never thought about exactly what the statistics were, and I never read about it. But I would suspect that 2 months is about an average on the front line.
The reason I mention this is because we've heard stories, similar types of stories where guys were going in, especially the guys that had been in college and then were kind of thrown back into the infantry. They didn't necessarily get all the best training at that point to be prepared for what they were getting into.
Yeah.
And we've heard that the casualty rates were pretty high with the people who had that experience.
Oh yeah. The people who came from the replacement depot, known as the Repo Depot, were always given the worst jobs, put up way up front in the front line. Right? Old soldiers never died; they just put the new ones up to the front.
But what you're talking about is not unusual to us, because we've talked to some
Yeah.
other people who were those replacements,
Yeah.
and some of them didn't make it 2 months.
No, I'm sure.
And it was unusual and it took a long time for them to kind of earn the respect
Yeah.
of the veterans. And a veteran meaning somebody who might have been there a month or two,
Yeah.
3.
Yeah. We had, before we went over, excellent training. I was superbly trained.
How much contact did you have fighting the Germans?
Well, I was at Battle of Six Bushes, and then there was the Battle of the One-Armed Guy. That wasn't a very long battle either. And then the one where I shot the man. And before that tank business, I was coming up from the rear, and my company was already fighting. And suddenly I felt the earth shaking. I thought, well, the horses are galloping. But it would turn out to be the company in retreat. And the whole company came on me. And I managed to keep my position. And I came up further, and there was a trio of our guys. One sergeant, he was saying, whatever his name was, Goldstein, "Where did you leave your rifle?" He says, I don't know. I must have left it at the edge of the woods." And he falls on a heap. And so one of the other guys goes up to look for the rifle, but he couldn't find it. He came back, and I said, "What happened to Norm Goldstein up there?" He says, "Well, we didn't suffer very many casualties, but Norm was right there when Bill, what's his name, got his face shot away. He was looking right at him." So they take him down to the aid station, I guess, And the sergeant said, well, he won't need no rifle where he's going anyway. Yeah. Anyway, there was that battle and the tank, and then the bitch battle.
You said the war was ramping down. How fast were you moving into Germany?
Well, not very fast. Let's see, you've heard of Baccarat. We came to there about 2 or 3 weeks after we started fighting. And then we moved forward and sideward and forward for another couple of months. And we arrived at a town called Bitche. It was Bitche. And the French probably pronounce it biche, but I heard the locals pronouncing it, they called it Bitche. The area was occupied by Germans for a long time throughout history. And a lot of the names of the towns there are German. So that doesn't surprise me. So we arrived at Bitche and we took the College of Bitche, which was on the southern border of the town. And we occupied that. It could have swallowed up 6 companies, but we had just 1 company in there. We were at the beginning of the Bitche battle, but it went on for a couple of months. And there's a big, huge citadel on a hill there that the ancient French had put up. And the Germans were defending it for a while. But we finally took that and everything else connected with Bitche, which is in the Maginot Line.
At this time, was this late in 1944? Had it started getting cold, getting into winter yet?
Yeah, we had snow already, and it was late December. I was wounded on December 18th.
So we've heard, I know Alsace-Lorraine is further to the east and the south of where the Battle of the Bulge was, but we've heard about how cold that winter was in that part of France. And kind of describe what the conditions, not just fighting in those conditions, but just living in those kind of conditions.
Yeah, I don't know, because I really was only there for a very short time in the snow. But there was a counterattack. There was the Battle of the Bulge, and when the Germans started losing there, they began counterattacking down into the Bitche area. And my unit fell back and curled around and kept them from going any further. Yeah. But I wasn't there then. Bitche is about, 10 miles from Germany, but I never got into Germany. Our sergeant said, Pettee, you and this other guy, take these 2 able-bodied prisoners back to battalion headquarters. We said, okay. He said, leave here about 5 a.m. So we woke up and got our able-bodied prisoners out, and it was so dark you couldn't see anything. If they'd moved a foot or 2 any direction, we would have lost them. But they were not interested in getting away. They were interested in surrendering. And so they were helpful. One of them says, Minen dabei, meaning their minds over there. So I said, all right, we'll avoid that. So we went around the other way, and we came to the battalion headquarters, delivered our prisoners, and there was the pioneer platoon, which had hot breakfast for the company. So we were leading him back, the other man I was with was in front of me, about 20 feet, and the head of the pioneer platoon was behind me. And we were marching along back toward the company when suddenly, slam, I was looking right at an explosion at my feet. I was up in the air. I said, this is it, I'm dead. But I wasn't, obviously. And I fell down on my face, head down the hill and face down. And my most painful wound was in my left thigh, but I can move that leg okay. But I couldn't feel my right leg at all. I knew it was in bad shape.
You'd stepped on a mine, I presume.
Yeah. I think it was a bouncing Betty mine. You ever hear that? It bounced up, hit the bottom of the box I was carrying, and went back down so that it went off in front of my leg instead of my face. A friend came over and said, you'll be okay. I'll put a tourniquet on your leg, don't worry. I got the medic. I said, Doobie, I love you, Doobie. And they patched me up and they put me in a Jeep and drove me back to, first to the, what's it called, I've forgotten, anyway. And they said, we can't do anything for him here, send him further back. And I finally got back to the evacuation hospital. And by that time I was with the morphine and everything else. And then I woke up the next morning and I was bandaged head to foot. And my right leg was in a cast, but the foot was still there. So the surgeon came by and he said, soldier, this foot may have to come off. I'm not at all sure about the circulation to it. And for whatever reason, I didn't feel anything. I said, oh, they make pretty good artificial ones, don't they? And he says, yeah, but there's nothing like the real thing. And because of his administrations and everybody else that I ran into, I still have the real thing.
What kind of wounds did you have? You talked a little bit about it, but how seriously were you wounded?
Well, my, you know what the tibia is? My right tibia was blown to pieces, and they packed it back in, but it had to be debrided later. Took all the dead stuff out. My leg is 2 inches short, but it's solid.
How long were you in the evacuation hospital after you came off the front, before they put you on a hospital ship and sent you?
Oh, I was in the evac hospital about a week. Then they sent me to another hospital nearby for another couple of weeks. And then one down in Aix-en-Provence near Marseille for another week or two. So I didn't really start back to the States for a couple of months.
You were wounded on the 18th. Do you remember Christmas that year?
Not particularly.
I wondered, just because of the nature of your wounds and being in the hospital, I just wondered if you were aware of what was going on at that time.
Not particularly, no. I was in the evacuation hospital for about 10 days. So I would have been in the evacuation hospital on Christmas Day.
With the wounds, you weren't thinking
No.
about other things, no.
No.
Hey, did your family know much about what you've gone through?
Well, 3 days after I was wounded, the Red Cross woman came up and said, do you want me to write to your parents? And I said, yeah. I dictated an extremely short letter, which exhausted me. I said, I've been seriously wounded in the right leg, but I'm otherwise okay. That was it. But the War Department was even worse. They sent a telegram to my parents, your son has been seriously wounded. We'll let you know if there's anything else. And finally they said, well, not finally, but then they said, another one said, your son has been seriously wounded in the right arm. I didn't even get the limb right. And, but generally he's doing well. At least they said that. And they finally, well, my parents knew a guy who had connections with the War Department, and he found out what exactly my condition was and reported to my parents.
How long, you mentioned sending the letter back, how long was it before you were able to really contact your family and tell them what you had been through and that you were recovering?
It's hard to know. I probably wrote them a couple, 3 weeks after I was wounded, more thoroughly than just that brief sentence. But after I was on the seas, I couldn't send any letters.
Today, you're wounded and you almost call home the same day and let people know what's going on.
Yeah, right. So I landed back in the States in South Carolina, and my father came down and visited me there and see how I was.
And when you got back to, you mentioned South Carolina was the first hospital. Did you stay there or did you go to other places when you
Yeah.
got recovery?
I stayed there for a week or two, and then they sent me up to Ashford General Hospital in West Virginia, which was, let's see, what is it called? It's a resort. Was at that time, I don't know what it is now.
It wasn't the Greenbrier, was it?
It was, that's it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
the
very famous resort.
Yeah, Greenbrier Hotel. Yeah.
That had to be a pretty nice place. I
Yeah,
think.
it was, yeah.
So, and that was a place where you did a lot of your convalescence?
Yeah, I was there for, let me see, from about April 45 to a year and a half later.
How long did it take you to really recover from the wounds?
Well, it took them 2.5 years to put me back together.
All this time you stayed
Yeah.
in the military?
Yeah, I think, it probably could have been done faster, but, I mean, after all, at least they did it right. I thought, well, I'll walk again. I was pretty sure I would.
How many surgeries did it take to rebuild your leg?
How many surgeries? I never counted them, but I'd say 20. After they took all the dead stuff out, they put a thin, split thickness skin graft over the whole thing. There was a big hole there, but they grafted inside that too. And then they said, we're going to do what's called a tube pedicle. And we're going to grab a hunk of flesh from the back of your leg and leave it tied at the ends, and then when we're sure the circulation's okay, we'll hook one end of it to the wound. And anyway, so they started that, but it didn't heal right, and they couldn't use it.
How did you feel your military medics were, the doctors?
Generally, I thought my care was excellent. One of the doctors, a surgeon at Valley Forge, no, not Valley Forge, the other one, Ashford General Hospital, West Virginia, I didn't think was any good at all. And they knew I was interested in medicine, so they let me see a movie they'd made of not only my own wound surgery, but somebody else's. And the the chief surgeon who was overseeing all it says, "Yeah, that's pretty lousy photography." And he says, "The surgery's not much better either," as if I wasn't there. I was looking at the X-rays. I said, "Maybe it's that piece of metal in there that's preventing it from." Oh, they said, "That's it. We'll take that out." So they took me up and they operated on it, and it healed up after that. But then, much later, I was secretly reading my record, my medical record, and I discovered that they didn't take out a piece of metal. They took out a 4x4 surgical gauze they'd accidentally left in there. That was why I didn't like this one guy.
That's incredible. It's a good thing you knew there was metal.
Yeah, right.
That must also have confirmed why you should be a doctor.
That's right.
The way you describe it and having your leg shattered, the bone shattered like that, it had to be pretty advanced surgery at the time just to get you to the point where you could use your leg at all.
Oh, yeah. After they'd done this debridement, taking all the dead stuff out, and molding it back into a reasonable shape, it took about, I don't know, 6 months before I could walk on it. And I had a brace initially, and I discovered it was useless after I was discharged, so I threw it away.
After all these surgeries and things like that, what kind of physical therapy did you have to go through to learn how to walk and
Yeah.
be able to and live normally again?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, and of course I had the brace at first and crutches, but I gradually got away from these. But the main thing was to make my thighs strong, those muscles.
Did they have a strict rehab formula for you, or was it just you kind of worked through it?
Just work through it, yeah. About very close now to 7 years ago, I had the right knee replaced because of arthritic pain. And when he got done with that, it looked okay, seemed to be all right, but it didn't bend far enough as far as he was concerned. My knee wouldn't flex far enough. Even with physical therapy, they couldn't get it to bend far enough. So he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you and put you under general anesthesia and bend it like that. So that's what he did. And what it did was it tore all of the old scars up, from the old war injury. My surgeon who did this thing reported that at a meeting. This had happened to him. And another guy stood up and said, I had the same thing happen to me, and it was an old war injury. And my daughter was talking to this surgeon, and he kept talking about how this had happened to him. She said, it didn't happen to you, it happened to my father. What puzzled me recently is that my recollection is that not very many guys lost their legs, lost their feet in the Second World War. Maybe they did, but I didn't hear about it. Whereas you're always seeing these pictures of these guys with their artificial legs since the recent wars.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand that. I'm a retired neurologist, and when when I was in medical school, and in my first years in residency, people didn't know I'd been wounded. I was able to walk so normally.
What made you go to medical school?
Oh, probably that experience. I thought I'd be a musician one time when I was in high school, but I went right after I was discharged from the hospital the last time. I went to Tanglewood, and I sang in all the groups there. But I learned that there were people there who were younger than I was, who were already in the Metropolitan Opera, and I decided I probably wouldn't make it. So I had this other thing. When I went to college, I kept thinking about being a doctor.
Where'd you go to school?
Went to Yale University undergraduate, and I used a regular GI Bill for that, as I remember. And then I used my disability compensation to go to medical school. It's Columbia, physicians and surgeons.
You really went to some great schools.
Yeah,
Where did you go to work first, practicing?
in Rochester, New York. Yeah.
How'd you wind up there?
Well, let's see, how did I happen to go there? I don't know. I visited several different places, and I guess I liked that one best.
Did you find other ex-GIs when you got out into the medical field that had come out like you did?
Not very many. No.
What kind of a practice did you have there in Rochester?
Well, I was a neurologist, which is diseases of the brain and the spinal cord and the nerves. And initially I practiced alone, and then I got several partners.
How long did you do that?
Let's see, I went into practice in 61 or 2, and I retired in 96. So it was about 30 years.
So you really fell into something that you really enjoyed then?
Oh, yeah. I have written a memoir. This is it. I won't read it to you now.
Oh, that's nice that you have it.
Yeah, it's going to be published shortly. This is the title of it. One son of bitch tells of unfinished business in a combat diary of World War II. Now you see that thing there? It says the Society of the Sons of Bitch. All the people who fought there got into it. This is to certify that Dan Pettee is a legitimate son of bitch, duly elected into the ranks of the Exalted Society. So that's the title of my memoir, and I think it's a good one.
And you're going to have that published, huh?
Yeah, I have a guy reading it now.
That's good.
He's in California.
Are you happy to get something like this published? Because the youth of America are not hearing and seeing
No.
about this.
Of course, I'm a very old guy. I'm 90 years old. And and it's been 71 years since I was in the war. And one other thing here. It says, unfinished business. 1, I still have some symptoms from my old wound. 2, I still am thinking about, talking about, and writing about my World War II experience. And 3, we still have a lot of unfinished business with a lot of world's dictators. I don't know whether war will solve that problem or not, but something will have to.
I'm glad that you're saving the memoirs
Yeah,
of this, because these stories have to be told and remembered.
yeah. This thing is pretty thoroughly digested now. But you might say, well, how come you waited 71 years to publish it? I don't know, I procrastinate, I guess.
You got there. But how is it finding the memories after all these years?
Well-
Did they come right back to you?
Yeah, they do. Of course, I wrote the first memories down while I was coming back in the hospital ship. So I knew, I remember a lot of it, and I may have elaborated on some of it, but most of it's true.
How has it affected you over the years after that?
Well, in my middle years, it didn't affect me at all. I remember I went with my son and daughter, then about ages 17 and 18, back to France and to Bitch. And I remember it as a dismal place, but it was a celebrating town when I found it years later.
Did you get to talk to people there?
There weren't very many people around there, for some reason. I couldn't understand that. Maybe it was just the wrong day, I don't know.
It had to be great just getting back to that site.
Oh, yeah. I have a quote in here from one of my friends. He said, some crazy guy in this outfit may come back and visit this place. Right back in these fucking battlegrounds. I didn't believe him at the time, but I've done it. And he say some of them may even write about it.
Well, the main thing is that you thought about writing down
Yeah.
memoirs from while you were coming back from
That's
being
right.
wounded.
A lot of soldiers don't like to talk about their experience, but I always did.
Do you think about the war much?
Not much. Of course, I've been trying to prepare this and get it published, so it requires some thought. But I imagine after I get it all done and published, I won't think about it so much anymore.
Have you had reunions from your unit?
Yeah.
How have those been?
Well, I've only been to 2 of them, and they were fun. Yeah.
Were there quite a few guys that came to them?
Oh yeah.
We've heard that's kind of good that people get together after
Yeah.
all the years.
One guy I met when I was living in downtown Denver. He was the man who was in front of me when I stepped on the mine, and he thought maybe he set it off. I don't know why. It would have been impossible.
It's amazing though that you'd run into him.
Yeah. Anyway, so he contacted me, and I assured him that it was not his fault, and I never heard from him again.